Greetings. This is Michael Mirdad coming to you from sunny Arizona. It's always sunny here, even in the shade, I think. Hence the casual attire, sorry about that, and the glare sometimes, because sometimes we just want to film outdoors. But anyway, I pray all of you are well. Have some different things we'll share today. This is part of our Friday evening spiritual insights with Michael Mirdad. So we'll progress from there. And just remember, there's a lot of things you can join us in, participate in. Lots of them, probably 70% of them are free. Sunday services at Unity of Sedona, live services. These Friday evenings, and then now and again we do other free events. Intros to other things, other workshops coming up and so forth. So just, keep your eyes open and, stay informed. You can also watch, it must be 50 YouTube events now, presentations or whatever, lectures, talks, whatever. And then we've got lots on other sites as well you can check out. There's a lot on my Facebook page, my public page, Michael Mirdad, so you can check there too. So, God, there's just... I don't know, probably years worth of study if you want to check that out, all right? As for today, something I want to share that's coming to me as of a few minutes ago, we're there's this theme happening, and it's very interesting to me because let's keep in mind, assuming that you are spiritual, if you're not, you may or may not like any of my talks or other people's talks on spirituality, but assuming you're spiritual and you believe in a creator, God, and so on, we come to understand that creator created us. We didn't create ourselves, although some New Age teachers think that we're just simply synonymous with God. That's a little bit of just the ego leaking in, trying to claim its divinity again. So when you hear even spiritual teachers do that, if they do it excessively, maybe change channels, go to somebody else to listen to. But it's normal for that to happen now and then, or a little bit, because the ego slips in, and it'll happen. And so when they promote a little of that, we are God. They're just missing it. They don't get it. You didn't create yourself. It doesn't make any sense. And if you did, you're not a very good creator, because we ended up in this mess, right? No, I'm kidding. But God created us and gave us free will. We didn't create ourselves. We were created, but God created us not flawed, as the ego would create us. God created us perfect and holy. So then we can say, well, then how did we end up in this mess? Like we would say if the ego created us. There's only one way we could end up here. It's not free will like you would think. Some of us go, because again, limited in our understanding, some students and teachers say, well, it must be that God created us and then God created us limited and we're supposed to grow and grow until we become unlimited. But that doesn't make any sense. God wouldn't say, I'm going to create you a 1 on a 10 scale. You need to become a 1. Kind of fight your way up. Why wouldn't God create you divine? You could say, well, it wanted us to learn. That doesn't make sense, because in God there is no learning. It's perfection. So a lot of those things don't make sense. And I would elaborate a little more, but for brevity's sake, I won't. In any case, then how else could it happen? Well, some people say God created us flawed because God itself is learning. Yeah, that's what God needs, us. God needs us to tell it. Listen, divinity, divine one, we were on earth and we have a report. Well, I hope so, because I'm God and I was hoping to expand my consciousness by your downloading some data to me. Well, God, here's what smoking is like, because you missed out. Here's what this and that and the other. Here's what death is like, and rape and molestation, or pleasantries. Here's what rainbows are like God wouldn't know that. So that doesn't make sense. But again, this is my silly way of saying those things are ridiculous, but I'm trying to be nice about it. But they're kind of ridiculous. They don't make sense, but I do understand, I swear. I do understand. Limited minds have to come up with limited philosophies or concepts. And that's totally understandable. Forgive them, they know not what they do. Moving along, what other reasons would we have to have gotten where we are? Well, God gave us free will, and we utilized our free will to end up in a place like this. That's partly true. We did get free will with our stamp of creation. you know, and we did use the free will to say, I wonder what life would be like if we were outside of heaven. Now it's not just free will to think that thought. That wouldn't have been a problem. But we used free will to choose to feel guilty about that thought. And that's where we got in trouble. Not literally, but that's where we got ourselves into trouble. Where as soon as the children of God who thought, and we know the law, thought creates. So as soon as we had a thought, I wonder what it's like if we could be separate from God, we said, uh-oh, all thoughts create, which means it just happened. Well, it didn't. And if you bear with me, this is a little twisty. It didn't happen because only true thoughts that can be thought will manifest anything. True thoughts meaning God thoughts. Only God is real. So only God-like thoughts are real. And so only God-like thoughts would create anything. Meaning, if they're love-based thoughts, well, thinking we're separated from God and feeling guilty about it is not a love-based thought. Therefore, guess what? It never happened. In reality, it never happened. Bear with me. I know that's a little out there for some. But in a sense, it never happened. The bad news is it feels like it did, because when we said, I wonder what it's like to be separate, and then said, uh-oh, now it's going to happen, we didn't create because only love creates, but we manufactured, we made up a belief because we created a new mind, like we're creators. So we created not a divine mind, but we created a fear-based mind called the ego and said to ourselves, what's going to happen now? We must be terrible. We just ruined our creation and so on. So we started doing all this obsessing. And then we created a world like this, and then we flew into this world, and then we create, okay, we're going to sit here and try to evolve and heal ourselves from our misbeliefs. And we've been doing this for millions of years and it hasn't worked. Why? Because we're biding our time. We're taking our sweet time because the ego is too much in control of people. Only individuals that say, I don't buy it, I'm going to accept my holiness and be what God created me to be, are actually the ones that wake up. So it's kind of interesting, kind of cool, kind of not cool when you think about how this really happened. Now, important. If you say, well, thanks for sharing, Michael, that's a little weird and I don't buy it, no problem. Don't post your comments to that effect when you're watching this. You can, but I'd prefer you didn't because it just detracts. But if you don't understand, it's no problem. Try this on. Let's forget I didn't even say any of that. Try this on. Think about how every single day when it seems like someone said something you didn't like, you think someone misjudged you. When someone leaves you for another, we do exactly the same process. We have a thought, or an experience, someone left me, or someone did this or that. And we go into the same chronology of thinking, which is, something must be wrong with me. How dare them, something must be wrong with me. And judging them, and judging ourselves, and then obsessing why. There's people that sit there, they'll start off at 17 with their first boyfriend or girlfriend, partner, whatever it is, and they'll be knitting at 117, going, what was wrong with me? I wonder if it's something I said. If only I could look them up and ask them why they left. It had to be something I did, something I said. Maybe I wasn't handsome enough, pretty enough. Maybe they heard a rumor about me. That same obsessing, is what we did when we left heaven. I wonder, what's going on? What do I do? What's wrong with me? What are the other souls doing that are departing from bliss? Maybe it's their fault that this is happening. We really do replicate it. So all of that is just to explain a little bit of a foundation. I want to just get to this. Now that all that seems to have happened, is it ever going to come to an end? Good news, bad news. Good news is, believe it or not, it actually came to an end one fraction of a second after it happened, because in heaven there's no time. So in the second that it happened, the very fraction of a second later, almost instantly, right after that, boom. Oh, wow, we were done. We had the thought and it was done because there's no time. But as soon as we thought we created a universe and went to live in it, that universe is like a time warp. In God, it's timeless. Up here, it's timeless. But all of a sudden, there was this veil of separation. Some of you have heard me talk about that. And then a time warp existed, a warp that created this loop. And we flew in and we lived one lifetime and another and another. And then you could say they're like layers of records. The old record players where you stack the records, remember that? On the post. And you could say that all your lifetimes are all those records. Here's one record, here's another record, and then think about this. Each lifetime is like a record. I talked about the Akashic Records at the last Sunday service at Unity and the last Friday night we did. But each of my records is a record of my life, a life. Now, you take all those records and you kind of look at your catalog of records. Some of us have a catalog that's, you know, as deep as, I don't know, I think there's a band called Argent. I think they had one album. They broke up before the album was even released. So some of us have that kind of history. Others have albums in their catalogs that we don't even want to remember having had. Lifetimes, in other words, where we go, man, you know, that was that album that, what was I thinking? And then some of us have our Sgt. Pepper's, you know, our Abbey Road, where we go, wow, God, so creative, so beautiful, and so on. It is our destiny not to have one-offs here and there, one good one, one bad one here and there. Our job is to get to the point where the records disappear because we've cleared them. There's nothing to look at. In other words, when you pass away, and some people say your life passes before your eyes, or some traditions say you'll be judged on Judgment Day. It's as though everybody's going to listen to all the records, and here's kind of what happens. If there's a Jesus waiting to look at your records with you, your book of life, to see if you passed or failed your tests, here's really what happens. The records are all put on the player each lifetime, remember, and some songs are some pretty naughty ones, and some songs are raunchy this way and that way. Some are absolutely blissful, creative. The bottom line is we're egotistically proud of the songs that are wonderful, and we're egotistically ashamed of the ones that aren't so wonderful. And if you are either of those, look at me for the good songs you've put onto your records. You're not awakened. And if you're, oh, I don't even want to think about that, or it wasn't my fault, it was the producer's fault, he ruined my song, or the band members, you're in trouble still. Really what's going to happen is it's a test. And Christ or whatever, God, whatever you want to believe, angels, they put the records on and they say, we're going to listen to your entire catalog in this Akashic jukebox, all the records. Okay. They put that on, and as soon as you wince at the idea or become emboldened at the idea of some song playing, then they're going to say, failed. Not in a judgmental, hateful way, but it'll be, in other words, as soon as you wince, it already means you feel guilty, which means you're already coming back to work on whatever that album or record was, song or whatever it was. Our job is to say, no matter what I could have done as a human being, there is no song that is the holiness of God, which is what I really am. No song I've ever written, no poem I've ever written can perfectly, I'm saying perfectly, reflect my holiness. They can only reflect it. They can't completely, perfectly represent it because they're not it. They're just expressions of me. And they're in my human form. If Mozart and Beethoven used to say that no song that we've ever composed, no composition has ever matched what we actually hear when we tune into the ethers, the heavens, then what makes you think our songs are that much better, our songs of life I'm talking about? No meal has ever been perfect, meaning holy, good tasting, nice. You've had moments maybe of wonderful sensual experiences with a partner, maybe great meals, maybe wonderful memories of your children somewhere along the line. All those are great. None of those compare to those events in their purity. Any event that you could say, oh gosh, my children, the birth, the first step, none of those, I mean, even come close to the tip of the iceberg to seeing the actual light of what your child is. You can say, oh, it's first step, and of course that's cool on a human level. Of course, I'm not dissing that. What I'm saying is there's a part of us that's going, wow, it's first step. If you could see it sprout wings, turn to light, and soar away in every dimension simultaneously, what are you then going to do? You know, that's what is the cool stuff. There's so much more. That's what I mean by don't be overly proud of your stuff, nor overly ashamed. Instead, just see them as that's what I was doing at the time. What can I learn from it? That's all that matters. Whatever I learn from it, I take with me, and it raises me to a whole nother level of consciousness. And that, you could say, helps me make quantum leaps. I go from baby steps to quantum leaps. I go from human to master, even in my evolution. And then master one day surrenders into the divinity completely. So that's kind of cool, right? On another note, as I've been teaching a lot about Christ consciousness lately, I have an online course that's just started a short time ago. You're welcome to still join us on that. And you can join at any time, because you can go back and pick, if we were 8 lessons into it, you could still go back and pick up the lessons. But I mean, it's very cool, very deep stuff. You can join us in that, and it's an online course. But if that doesn't suit you, or you can't for some reason, you can also join us in November, because we have our 5-day Christ Consciousness Intensive, which is different. Overlaps slightly from the online course, but they're different. So you can join us there if you like. Fantastic stuff. Great people, of course, attending. That's held here in Sedona. Not a bad place, right, to go to a workshop? Okay, nevertheless, I've been talking about Christ consciousness, and one thing I want to share with you, a little personal and historic stuff for me. When I was a kid, one of the earliest spiritual awarenesses I had was this, that whatever you study, make it consistent, make it not redundant, but make it hold up to a particular bar of quality. Make it hold up. Like, don't just read anything, study anything, do any workshop, listen to any teacher. Go to the best, go to the highest. And the highest in consciousness is Christ consciousness, because that's what God created us to be. Christ just means God in us, God in man. So Christ means the divinity in us. You could also call it the I am presence if you like. Those words get twisted into different meanings, just like Christ does. I am starts to mean certain groups. Christ means Christianity, and it all gets messed up. But Christ consciousness, I am, these are fantastic concepts because they're divinity in us. And that divinity is awaiting our remembrance. So when I teach and so forth, it's really about that. On any topic, I really lean toward that direction and bring everybody that direction. But one of the things I knew even as a kid was, Michael, whatever you study, let it hold up to that bar of quality. Let it measure up to awakening Christ. Like, don't just read anything, only the materials that are Christy, as I call it. Again, that's not to limit. That's not to say I don't read this and that. But I look for the books, teachers' teachings that had the light. I mean, you could just feel it, the presence of God. It could be Rudolf Steiner, Edgar Cayce, but I could feel it. It wasn't just metaphysical, because some metaphysics is heady, not necessary. I can read it and add a little something of it in whatever I teach. That's not a problem. I'm talking about what I would absorb myself in. I would not absorb in something. I don't want to absorb in a relationship that isn't real, and I don't want to absorb in a book that isn't as real as it could be. So that can sound a little stringent or intense for some, but maybe that's why, I understood things earlier than some people. And I'm grateful for that. And I'm not comparing to some people. I'm just saying maybe that's why some people are sitting around still in their not so great relations, reading their not so great books, So I knew that early on. And that was one of my first things, because I would know, I'd pick up a book and I always remembered, is this Christy? Does it have that vibe? Moving right along from that age era, shortly thereafter or during the same time, I started realizing this world is unlimited time. And I used to have guidance and visions and imagery and so on of earth changes. They weren't solid because sometimes those things change. Sometimes there's a prediction or prophecy and it changes per global change, consciousness change. But the spiritual people that think that, one prayer, Om Mani Padme, Boom Shakalaka, suddenly there's no such thing as earth changes or pole shifts. No, their efforts I think are great and every bit helps. But I would never brush it off and think that one of your little, living room prayers by the fireplace is going to release all of mankind from its collective beliefs, limiting beliefs and lessons that it's attracting. So we need not just change ourselves, we need to change all consciousness everywhere. So we should do some work ourselves, for ourselves, on ourselves, but we also need to do some group work. And I always had this thought, you know, like I knew the world's going to change. I always have taught, don't move to a place so that you're safe if you're miserable. You know, move to a place you would love living and can potentially be safer. So I've said in different talks, bear with me if this is a repeat for some, but very briefly, you know, coastal lands are generally not a good idea because the poles are melting, and they will melt. I've said that before they started making the news with it, and even now some people say it's a farce, it's not true. Man, it's very sad, but that's the ego, so it's expected. The more somebody says things like that, the more ego-filled you know they are. I don't even have to name names, but I know some of you are onto what I'm saying. When they start saying that whole thing's a lie, it's untrue, man, usually those are people making money off the melting of the poles. They probably have companies out there bottling water off the meltage, and you know, they're going to make money off it, so they don't want you to know that. I'm joking, but that's partly true. In any case, the poles are melting, the water levels are going to raise, in some cases gradually, in some cases dramatically. But that's going to happen, and so on and so on. So aside from that, I want to get to consciousness and say during these times of changes, there are several layers of plans in action already. One of those is materials released. So Jesus told Helen, who channeled A Course in Miracles, Jesus told her, Helen, the world is worsening at an alarming rate, and we need you to help to receive these new materials. Now, these new materials isn't just one book. You might have received even a poem, and it contributes. Publish the dang thing. Get it on the internet somewhere. If you believe in it, if you think and you can feel that it's real and Christy to some degree. It doesn't have to say Jesus in every line or anything. I'm talking about if it feels like it offers frequency, not just words, but when someone reads it, they don't have to meditate, they don't have their eyes closed, they don't have to do any of that, but you can feel it when you've written it, that there's a vibration to it. How to know? It's clear, it's got this crispness to it, it's magical, and then you know you've contributed to God's plan for salvation in the written form, or verbal form if it's recited. A Course in Miracles is likely the most dramatic of those kinds of books in history, but certainly in modern history. I know other people have written books that they say is similar, better, continuations. They're wonderful. They have their own little piece to the plan, perhaps. But there's a plan, man, and it has layers. You and I are part of that. Why? Because I said so. I chose it. I chose to be part of it. All you have to do is go, I choose to be part of it, and then you are. You don't have to like be ordained by a group or anointed by a teacher. Just choose it. Just go, you know what? Blast it all, man. I can't screw around anymore. It doesn't mean you have to wear white and stand on street corners handing out brochures. Just in your heart and soul say, I am ready and I am willing and I am now part of God's plan for salvation. Now, more consistently I ask, God, guide me on everything to say and do, and what not to say and what not to do. There are a few key prayers that are Lightworker prayers. If you know one, recite it, as long as it feels like high vibe to you. I have been clear that there are layers of these plans for salvation. I know what they are. I've never published them, never spoke about them, and I still will not yet. But I can tell you this. One of them is that there needs to be 144,000 awakened souls. Awakened, not typical. Let me come back to that. And I don't mean it can't be more than 144,000. 144,000 symbolically means mankind. But since we can't wait around for all mankind to completely become awakened, not in this lifetime anyway, and it's beautiful, it's a beautiful vision, but I'm saying since it may not happen, that must not be what we're told we're supposed to do, is wait for them. What I'm saying is that behind the curtains and underneath the story, there is an anointing of 144,000 teachers of Christ consciousness. Who are they? They're not all standing on a podium, but when you really start to choose, it does mean you commit your life a bit more. It does mean you're interacting to some degree on the internet or even in groups to some degree or another. You don't have to be the leader of a group, but are you a participant? I can tell you that there are groups that, there are, besides 144,000 souls, there are groups that are very Christy. Edgar Casey's people are rooted in Christ consciousness. They're steeped in ego because they're an organization. And so organizations can have that, a lot of ego. And so there's fear and there's old-fashioned, it takes a year, it takes a million years for them, many organizations to make moves. Unity is very Christy. Edgar Casey's foundation, very Christy. Beautiful, all of them. But when voting and board meetings and decisions that take years are running a business, it's no longer Christy. Christ never said, I'm feeling inclined or inspired to do something right now, but we need to vote on it and we need to discuss it and we need to do this and that. Oh my God, or maybe they did and that's why he said, crucify me now. So anyway, kidding. Clearly he was not a fan of dogma and obligatory religion. So that's kind of what I'm saying. When the dogmas and all that stuff, whatever you want to call it, I have words for it, but I won't use them, is greater than the inspiration. God, think about that, man. Something's wrong. So I'm saying there are groups. If I inherited $1 million, I would consider still sending a tithe to Edgar Casey's foundation because of what he did, not of what they're doing. I would also think of not sending it to them because of what they're doing. My point being, I have enough respect where I would consider them. And the organization, Edgar Casey, Jesus says in A Course in Miracles regarding Edgar Casey, he said his organization will last and last. Not because of what they're doing now, because that was his way of being nice and saying, because, oh my God. And again, I'm not dissing the ARE, I'm using Casey's foundation as an example, and I could say it about every organization that is larger and larger. It gets into money and it gets into the dogmas, but Jesus did say in the private notes to Helen, Casey's foundation, known as the ARE, will last and last because of what spirit it was built on. Nevertheless, there's the stuff in there. In fact, Jesus even said to Helen, there are some amazing channelings Jesus did, Edgar Casey did with Jesus coming through, and all the material Casey channeled for that matter. There's a lot of it that is as high as you can get, but the filter known as Casey, Edgar, and his stenographer and the people in the room and his organization, even in those days, would create filters, let's call them, distractions, deviations, misinterpretations. And it was amazing because, and this is just brief, sorry to just bear with me here, but Jesus tells Helen, even Casey's descendant, Hugh Lynn Casey, what a jolly, great, beautiful soul he was. Jesus tells Helen, Hugh Lynn knows about the errors in the Casey readings, and he's trying to change them, but he will not be able to. That really hit me like a ton of bricks, man. Please try to hear what that means. We're talking about Jesus. Jesus saying the work was blessed. There were some errors in interpretation. There's somebody that knows what those errors are and will not be allowed to change them. Will not be allowed. Why? Because of dogma and boards and meetings and groups and fighting and infighting. And his own and the group's own resistance to the higher levels of the interpretation. So I'm using that as an example because it's a really vivid one. The same exact story applies to Rudolf Steiner's organizations, Unity, Science of Mind, Ernest Holmes' work, Christian Science. These are all rooted in Christ consciousness, but the stuff just deviates. There's the Rosicrucians around the world. Man, some of them got really messed up. The Essenes, some groups still try to follow the way of the Essenes of 2,000 years ago, and they can't because there's so much stuff in the way. So one of the things I've done and accomplished, I thank God, is to bring the Spirit, but not let too much of the other stuff get in the way. I can tell you certainly there's moments of filters and deviations and even allowing other people to push and pull me a little bit and my own stuff, but I'm really grateful that not to an extent to where something was ruined. So as I'm coming to a close, what I'm leading to is there are not only 144,000 needing to be awakened, not just awakened, awakened into Christ consciousness. There are people who say, well, I'm awakened, I had an amazing meditation, everything turned to light, so I'm awakened. There's people that shave their head and tell you, look at me, I have reached samadhi, which basically means I now am worthy of you paying me to sit in the same room with me. Although there's some sincere people with that, but you know, just try to feel it and see what they're about. Just so much of it's silliness and games, but I'm saying not just people that claim to be awake. There's yogis that teach yoga. They have systems in the States, for example, that claim awakening and just ends up being a nightmare of an ashram they have or of a commune they have. But who are they? It's not all the teachers that you think. It's going to be some of you are going to be one of those handful of hundreds of thousands, or tens or whatever of thousands, and they're all around the world. And then there's organizations. Although they're screwing up here and there, they're still rooted in Christ consciousness. So they will still be bearing light. They will still be holding presence as part of this awakening. People that are into systems of lesser than direct Christ consciousness, they're still contributing even if they don't call it Christ. They're just holding the vibration at different levels, different tones and semitones and vibrations. But again, I'm just saying, man, go for the Christ. Go for the gusto. So there's organizations, even if they seem deviated, they still have a root in Christ and they deserve some light and kudos and so on. Then there are fewer individuals. There's 12 in this lifetime. There are 12 that have to meet and connect with each other and hold space in their own way. And they are here and there on this planet. I can say I've met most, if not all of them. I won't say which, but I've met them. And they are almost always aware of who they are. They're one of the 12. These are just sacred numbers, but they're also sacred meanings. There's even 12 groups of people representing the zodiac, awakened zodiac. 12, let's say, Virgoians that are awakened, because there has to be all 12 signs represented in an awakened state on earth. You might not be the one of the 12 individuals that I'm talking about. You might be one of the 12 representing a planet, a sign. There's that. All things have to reach awakening. So each planet, each sign, the 144,000s are there, a certain number of organizations, and yes, 12 individuals, and they all are like, imagine grids, light bulbs all over the earth, and as they get plugged in, these 144,000, these groups, the more they start finding each other, the more they start activating each other's lights to a new level. And this is important because if any one of them sits around going, well, we're the Steiner group, we don't listen to the Ernest Holmes group, then you're a thread of light bulbs that aren't yet turned on. And if you are turned on, you have a blown fuse, so you're still not working to the degree you can. Or some of the lights are burned out on your string of lights. That's kind of what it's like. Not until they all connect. And I tried that, just like Jesus said, I tried to help Hugh Lynn Casey to awaken the Edgar Casey Foundation, and he can't. I feel that way. I've gone to these different organizations and said, you're Christed, man, come on. Yes, we are. Okay, then connect with this Christed group. Nope, not interested. They have different beliefs, different haircuts or whatever, I'm like, you people need to listen to Dr. Seuss or something. That each of you think you have your own little letter of enlightenment on your chest, your breast, and you can't deal with other people because they have a different letter. It's going to happen. The easy way or the hard way. And in my teachings, I got to admit, on a personal level, sometimes I get tired. I wish I didn't. I would like to think I'm so immune to that it didn't happen, but I do, man. I get sometimes tired and I give up sometimes and think, that's it, I'm just going to do my own teaching. And then there's times when waves of light come and I'm like, I get it. I hear you, Jesus. And I call him Jesus. Trust me, you can call him Jesus. Other people say, oh no, he answers to Yeshua, Jeshua, whatever. You can say, well, in Pig Latin, his real name is, you know what? Whatever. Refer to him and know what even more than his name, it's Christ. And then you can say, oh, it's Christos. Oh, geez. So my point is, whatever you call him, I say to him, I go, I hear you, I feel you, I get it, but they're not listening. I mean, what do? Write letters to them? All great. You think they're all sitting around, going, oh, I didn't realize that there were other spiritual groups that we can connect with. They don't want to. Ego is so steep and strong in their groups. Does that mean I'm telling you I'm giving up, that I permanently will give up? No, I'm telling you it's tempting sometimes. But underneath all that, even when you're trying to change family members and it doesn't work, underneath all that, there's an old saying in the Bible, let others do as they may, but as for me and mine, we will serve the living God. So what I'm doing is my part to connect and help people get connected. I teach it. I even spew out my little tirades now and again and my comments about these groups. You think it's just because I want to sit around and be rude to them? No, I'm hoping they can hear now and again. I'm here hoping that one of you says something to one of them. Don't tell them, don't tell them Michael said, but you can say, come on, wake up, there's another group. Let's get involved. Let's create conferences of all these groups instead of you guys having your own little conference. And I've done that. I've brought different people together, and they don't stay together. They just, it's weird, but they don't. So I'm going to keep doing my work for me and mine, and I'm going to continue reaching out to others. I was just being honest telling you it's tiring sometimes, just like it is with our family members or loved ones or at work or wherever. It really is much the same. So in closing, my last bit is this, just that there are all these awakenings waiting. You might be one of them. It doesn't matter if you are or not. Your job is to awaken. You might be one of the non-members of those things that are supposed to be bringing the Christ to that group. Maybe you're just supposed to be the person in your country that's one of the people in that country. It's not about being special, one of, three of, whatever. It's doing the Christ work wherever you are, whoever you are. So at this time, I'll share more of it later on sometime, but at this time I can see myself now preparing a retreat for down the road, and preparing a place which would be probably the last place I would live, if not Sedona, and having it more of a place of complete holistic experience. Love or God lived in every way, shape, and form, from community to everything we do, just like I have taught in my life and mastery, and just as I taught and practiced at Unity of Sedona. We spiritualized everything. We pulled it off and we proved it can be done. I wish others or organizations would do it. I've brought that light and message to them, and they become too afraid. And I hope you understood all of what I was sharing here. Join us if you can on Sunday, Sunday 11:15, I think 11:30, for the live Sunday services from Unity of Sedona. And you can watch several other programs, YouTube, Facebook, whatever. We have libraries, catalogs of things that are just free to check out. As I always say, if you love it, check it out. If you don't, move on, but please find something that you do love, okay? And I really, really pray the light to be awakened in you, in myself, and in all. And, God first, Christ first, not to settle on things that are kind of second or third or 15th in order. Let's just do our best to connect to that frequency of light. There's a light in the pagans, there's a light in the Catholics, there's light everywhere. And if you're going to stay in one of those groups, be one of the light bearers in those particular groups. You also have the right to join groups that are more overtly light, Whatever you do, be the light, all right? I pray this has made sense. Many blessings to you, and remember to like us and do all those things that Facebook asks you to do. And when you do so, you can ask to be given notices as to when we're doing any things on Facebook, and then you'll be able to watch again, okay? Many blessings and lots of love to you. Peace. Bye-bye.